There is a moment that arrives quietly, almost invisibly. Before life rearranges itself, it does not announce its importance. It does not feel dramatic or powerful. In fact, it often feels like confusion, like emptiness, like standing in a place where nothing makes sense anymore. This is the moment most people misinterpret. They believe something has gone wrong when in truth something has finished. Right before everything changes, the old inner structures collapse. The beliefs you once relied on stop working. The identities you built no longer fit. You may notice that the things that once motivated you now feel hollow. The future you imagined no longer excites you, yet nothing new has appeared to replace it. This is not failure. This is the psyche clearing space. At this stage, life removes certainty. It takes away clear direction, so you are forced to listen inward instead of reaching outward. You may feel lost, but this loss is purposeful. When the conscious mind can no longer control the path, a deeper intelligence begins to speak. Most people drown out this voice with distraction, rushing to rebuild something familiar. But if you stay with the discomfort, you witness something rare. You begin to see patterns you never noticed before, repeating situations, familiar emotional wounds resurfacing, the same types of people triggering the same reactions. This repetition is not punishment, it is revelation. Life is showing you what has remained unconscious. What you refuse to face will continue to return until awareness replaces avoidance. Right before transformation, emotions intensify. Old grief surfaces without explanation. Anger appears where you thought you had forgiven. Fatigue settles into your body even when nothing physical is wrong. This is the psyche releasing stored weight. Healing does not feel like relief at first. It feels like exposure. You are seeing yourself without the filters that once protected you. Another sign appears quietly. You stop seeking approval the way you used to. Validation loses its grip. You still care, but it no longer defines you. Something inside begins to detach from external judgment. This is the beginning of inner authority. When this emerges, the old world cannot hold you anymore. Right before everything changes, solitude becomes necessary. You may feel pulled away from noise, from crowds, even from people you love. This withdrawal is not rejection. It is integration. The psyche requires silence to reorganize itself. In stillness, the fragmented parts begin to align. You may also notice a strange calm underneath the chaos, a sense that despite not knowing what comes next, something is unfolding exactly as it should. This calm does not come from logic, it comes from alignment. When inner truth starts guiding you, fear no longer dominates, even if uncertainty remains. This moment is rare because most people escape it. They numb it, they rush past it, they rebuild the same life with different details. But if you are seeing this, if you are living in this in-between space where the old no longer exists and the new has not yet formed, understand this clearly. You are standing at the threshold. This moment only appears once in this form. If you honor it, everything changes. If you ignore it, life will repeat it in harsher ways. Transformation does not begin with confidence or clarity. It begins with honesty, with the courage to face what you have avoided, with the willingness to let the false self dissolve. What comes next is not a better version of who you were. It is someone real. Right before transformation, the old structures of identity and belief collapse, creating space for something new. This process is rarely sudden or dramatic in the way the mind expects. Rather, it begins subtly, almost imperceptibly, as if the foundations you have relied on your entire life are quietly dissolving beneath you. You may notice first a sense of disorientation, a feeling that the familiar pathways you have walked your entire life no longer lead anywhere meaningful. The thoughts, habits, and routines that once seemed stable and reliable begin to feel empty, like the echo of a voice that no longer belongs to you. This emptiness is not a void to be feared, but a signal that the psyche is preparing for a shift, a preparation that cannot occur while the old structures remain intact. The collapse is not violent, it is gradual, like a slow erosion that reshapes the landscape without the fanfare of catastrophe. The moment you realize that the life you thought was permanent is, in fact, impermanent, marks the beginning of a transformation that demands attention, awareness, and courage. At first, you may resist this change, clinging to the familiar patterns that have given your life a sense of continuity. The mind will offer countless reasons to stay the same, to maintain the identity you have carefully constructed, to ignore the subtle signs that something is shifting. These reasons are seductive because they are comfortable. They promise security and control in a world that suddenly feels unstable. Yet deep within, There is a part of you that recognizes the inadequacy of the structures, that senses their inability to hold the fullness of your being. This tension between comfort and necessity, between holding on and letting go, creates an inner friction that can feel unbearable. It is in this friction that the first stirrings of transformation are born, because the psyche cannot evolve without challenge, cannot expand without the dissolution of what has been. The collapse of old beliefs and identity structures is often accompanied by a reordering of values. Things that once seemed urgent lose their significance, while subtle truths you may have overlooked begin to demand attention. You may find yourself questioning long-held assumptions about who you are, what you want, and what matters most. Relationships, careers, habits, and ambitions are no longer seen through the lens of obligation or societal expectation, but through the clarity of personal resonance. Some people will appear and disappear from your life without explanation. Some opportunities will fade, and some doors will close quietly. Each shift is a message, an indication that the old structure cannot accommodate the emerging self, and that, in order to step into a new way of being, you must release what no longer serves you. Emotional intensity often accompanies this process. You may feel grief for the loss of the familiar, even if it was never entirely authentic or fulfilling. Anger, confusion, fear, and even despair may surface not as a sign of failure, but as a necessary cleansing, a purging of attachments that no longer align with your true nature. These emotions are the markers of transformation, not obstacles to it. To resist them is to resist the process itself. To engage with them fully is to participate in the unfolding of your own evolution. In this engagement, the psyche begins to restructure itself, allowing previously hidden aspects of your inner life to emerge. Shadows, vulnerabilities, and unacknowledged desires may come into view, but they are not threats. They are the raw material of a new identity, the pieces that must be integrated if transformation is to be genuine and enduring. The process also demands a re-evaluation of personal boundaries and relationships. As the old structures dissolve, so too does the energy invested in certain connections that were once sustaining. People who were compatible with the old version of you may no longer resonate with the emerging self. Conversely, relationships that felt peripheral may reveal a depth of connection that was previously invisible. This realignment is essential, because the external environment must reflect the inner transformation. Life will mirror the internal collapse and reconstruction, presenting circumstances that challenge you to embody the truth of your new self, even before it is fully formed. Each encounter, each interaction, carries a subtle invitation to test, refine, and affirm the emerging identity. Amidst the collapse, there is an opportunity for deep introspection. You may find yourself drawn into reflection, meditation, or creative expression as ways to navigate the disorientation and listen to the emerging inner voice. Silence becomes a necessary companion, not as an absence, but as a space where the new self can begin to take shape. In this silence, insight arises not as a product of conscious planning or rational thought, but as a recognition of patterns, symbols, and truths that were always present but obscured by the old structures. The process is non-linear and often unpredictable, requiring patience, trust, and a willingness to surrender control. Physical experiences may also accompany the psychological collapse. Energy levels fluctuate, sleep patterns shift, and sensations in the body may feel unfamiliar or heightened. These are not mere side effects, but manifestations of the deep inner work occurring beneath the surface. The body participates in the restructuring, signaling what the mind alone cannot perceive. Attending to these physical cues with care and awareness allows the transformation to proceed with great ease, ensuring that the integration of the new self is holistic, encompassing mind, body, and spirit. Ultimately, the collapse of old structures is not destruction but preparation. It is a clearing, an opening, a necessary unraveling that creates space for the emergence of a self that is more authentic, more aligned, and more alive. The process may feel disorienting, unsettling, or even painful at times, but it is purposeful. Every doubt, every loss, every emotional upheaval is a guidepost pointing toward a life that is truer to who you are meant to become. Transformation begins in this quiet dissolution, in the willingness to face the unknown, and in the courage to release the familiar in favor of the emerging possibility. Life presents repeating patterns and emotional triggers to reveal what has remained unconscious. These patterns are rarely random. They are messages from the inner self, signals designed to draw attention to aspects of your psyche that have been ignored, suppressed, or denied. Often they manifest as recurring difficulties in relationships, work, or personal decisions, situations that feel familiar yet frustrating, and emotions that rise with surprising intensity. These moments, while uncomfortable, are not meant to punish or hinder you. They are an invitation to look deeper, to see yourself as you truly are rather than as you have pretended to be. The universe, in its own way, is relentless in offering these mirrors until awareness is cultivated. Each repetition carries the potential for insight, a chance to recognize the patterns that govern your behavior and the underlying beliefs that shape your life. When these patterns appear, they often provoke strong emotional reactions. You may feel anger, resentment, fear, or sadness, sometimes disproportionate to the circumstances themselves. This is because the external event is not the root cause. It is a reflection of unresolved conflicts within. The intensity of the emotion serves as a guidepost, highlighting the places in your psyche that demand attention. Many people instinctively seek to avoid these feelings, distracting themselves with activity, rationalization, or external validation. Yet avoidance delays understanding, prolongs suffering, and prevents transformation. The conscious mind can only grasp the surface of the experience, but the unconscious communicates through repetition, symbolism, and emotional resonance, urging you to notice what has been overlooked. Patterns often appear in the form of relationships that challenge you in similar ways. The same types of people may enter your life repeatedly, bringing with them familiar dynamics and unresolved tensions. These encounters are not coincidences, they are reflections of unresolved inner material, showing you where old wounds or unacknowledged desires persist. The discomfort in these interactions is a tool for self-awareness, a mechanism through which the psyche demands recognition of its hidden content. By observing these patterns without judgment, you begin to discern the underlying structures that govern your behavior, the fears, attachments, expectations, and projections that shape your responses. Awareness is the first step toward breaking the cycle and stepping into a conscious engagement with life. The emotional triggers associated with these patterns are equally significant. A situation that provokes disproportionate anger may reveal suppressed resentment, while repeated feelings of sadness may point to neglected grief or unfulfilled longing. Anxiety may emerge in circumstances that challenge long-held assumptions, exposing the fragility of a constructed identity. These triggers are not obstacles to overcome through sheer willpower, they are signals to be explored, understood, and integrated. The conscious mind often resists the depth of these revelations, preferring simple explanations or external blame. Transformation requires patience and courage, a willingness to descend in the hidden recesses of the self and confront what has been concealed. Repetition is a form of communication from the unconscious. Life continues to present similar scenarios until recognition occurs, until the underlying lesson is grasped. This is why patterns often feel inescapable, why history seems to repeat itself despite efforts to change circumstances. The repetition is not punishment, it is an opportunity. Each recurrence offers a chance to respond differently, to act with awareness rather than impulse, to break free from the automatic cycles that have governed your life. To ignore the patterns is to remain caught in unconscious loops, while to engage with them is to invite growth, insight, and liberation. Dreams, synchronicities, and intuition frequently accompany these repetitive experiences, offering guidance from layers of consciousness beyond the rational mind. The unconscious communicates in symbols, metaphors, and subtle impressions, guiding attention to unresolved material. By observing these signs, by reflecting on recurring themes in both waking life and dreams, you gain access to knowledge that is not accessible through logic alone. This process requires trust in the inner voice, a willingness to listen to subtle promptings, and a patience that allows understanding to unfold gradually rather than demanding immediate answers. The psyche has its own timing, and transformation cannot be rushed. The recognition of these patterns leads to self-inquiry. You begin to ask questions that pierce the surface of ordinary awareness. Why do certain people provoke such strong reactions? Why do I find myself in the same type of conflict repeatedly? What fears or desires am I projecting onto others? The answers are often uncomfortable, challenging cherished self-images and long-held beliefs. Yet this discomfort is the precursor to liberation. The process of identifying and understanding the unconscious material embedded in recurring patterns dissolves illusions and reveals the authentic self beneath. Each insight is a step toward integration, a piece of the puzzle that allows life to be experienced with greater clarity and freedom. Integration requires action as well as awareness. Recognition of patterns is only meaningful when it informs behavior, where the insights gained are applied in conscious engagement with life. This may involve setting new boundaries, making different choices in relationship or career, or embracing emotions that were previously denied. The process is iterative. Mistakes, setbacks, and repeated patterns are part of the journey. Awareness is not a single event, but a continuous unfolding, a dance between recognition, reflection, and response. By remaining attentive to recurring dynamics and the emotions they elicit, you gradually align with a more conscious, authentic way of being. It is important to remember that these patterns are not merely personal. They are also archetypal. They reflect universal human experiences: loss, longing, attachment, fear, desire that exist beyond the individual self. When these patterns appear, you are not only confronting personal material, but also connecting with broader currents of human experience. This recognition situates personal challenges within a larger context, providing perspective and reducing the sense of isolation. You are participating in the same processes that have shaped human consciousness for millennia, and the insights gained from observing patterns resonate far beyond the boundaries of your own life. Ultimately, the repetitive patterns and emotional triggers that life presents are opportunities for awakening. They are signposts directing attention inward, guiding the journey from unconscious reactivity to conscious choice. Each recurrence is a chance to recognize the unseen forces that shape behavior, to integrate fragmented aspects of the self, and to step into a more authentic, aware, and empowered existence. By embracing the patterns, rather than resisting or denying them, the pathway to transformation becomes visible. The process requires honesty, patience, courage, and a willingness to confront both the light and shadow within, for it is in this confrontation that growth emerges, and a deeper understanding of life unfolds. Solitude and stillness are necessary for inner alignment and integration before change occurs. In a world that constantly demands attention, movement, and response, the quiet spaces of life are often undervalued. Yet they are where the deepest transformation takes root. True change cannot be forced through activity alone. It requires a retreat from the external noise, a turning inward, where the psyche can reorganize itself without distraction. Solitude is not merely the absence of company, it is the presence of self, an encounter with the mind, body, and spirit in their unmediated state. In stillness, the internal world becomes visible. The subtle rhythms of thought and emotion can be observed, and the structures of identity that govern behavior can be examined. Without this inward focus, the new cannot emerge, for the old patterns will continue to dominate under the guise of familiarity. The necessity of solitude often becomes apparent when the old structures of life begin to collapse. As familiar routines, relationships, and beliefs dissolve, a gap appears, a space of uncertainty that can feel uncomfortable or even frightening. Many people instinctively rush to fill this space with activity, distraction, or external validation, attempting to recreate the semblance of order and security. Yet it is precisely in the acceptance of this emptiness that transformation begins. The mind resists silence because it exposes hidden truths, unresolved conflicts, and parts of the self that have long been neglected. To remain in stillness is to confront these truths, not as a form of punishment, but as an opportunity for realignment and integration. Solitude, then, becomes both a challenge and a gift, offering a space where the fragmented self can begin to coalesce into a more coherent and authentic whole. Stillness is more than physical inactivity. It is a state of attentive presence. It requires the ability to observe thoughts without immediate reaction, to allow emotion to arise without suppression, and to notice patterns of behavior without judgment. In this attentive state, the unconscious begins to communicate with the conscious mind, revealing insights that were previously inaccessible. Symbols, images, and intuitive flashes may arise, guiding awareness toward aspects of the self that demand recognition. The process is delicate and often subtle. It cannot be rushed or forced. The deeper one goes into stillness, the more the noise of habitual thinking diminishes, allowing clarity and insight to emerge naturally. During periods of solitude, the intensity of emotions may increase. Feelings that were previously ignored or pushed aside rise to the surface, demanding attention. Grief, anger, fear, and longing may appear in heightened form, not to overwhelm, but to illuminate what requires integration. These emotional surges are not signs of weakness. They are necessary processes through which the psyche cleanses itself. By fully experiencing these emotions in solitude, one allows them to be witnessed and transformed rather than projected outward or suppressed. This process fosters a deep connection with the self, creating a foundation of authenticity and resilience that supports the changes that are to come. Solitude also fosters clarity of values and priorities. Removed from external influence and societal expectations, one can discern what truly matters, what aligns with the inner truth, and what belongs to the old structures that are dissolving. Choices that once seemed dictated by obligation, fear, or habit can be re-evaluated in the light of personal resilience and integrity. The inner voice, often drowned out by the demands of life, begins to assert itself, guiding attention toward paths that are genuinely aligned with the emerging self. In this way, stillness is not passive. It is an active engagement with the truth of one's being, a preparation for conscious participation in life rather than reactive repetition. The practice of solitude and stillness also strengthens the capacity for observation. By withdrawing from constant stimulation, one becomes attuned to subtle currents within the mind and body. Thoughts, impulses, and sensations that were previously unnoticed now become evident. Patterns of fear, desire, avoidance, and attachment emerge, providing material for reflection and integration. This heightened awareness is essential for transformation because it allows to recognize and disengage from the unconscious habits that have constrained growth. The ability to observe oneself with honesty and clarity creates the conditions for choice, enabling actions to be guided by conscious intention rather than automatic reaction. Physical and environmental stillness often support inner stillness, but they are not sufficient on their own. True stillness involves a presence of mind and heart, an attentive engagement with the inner landscape. Practices such as meditation, journaling, mindful walking, or simply sitting in quiet contemplation can facilitate this inner engagement. The goal is not to escape life, but to enter it with greater awareness, allowing the psyche to reorganize and integrate the fragments of self that have been scattered by experience, expectation, and unconscious patterns. Solitude creates a laboratory in which the self can experiment with new ways of thinking, feeling, and being, free from the distortions imposed by external pressures. Another aspect of solitude is the confrontation with inner shadow. In the quiet, the hidden, neglected, or denied aspects of the self come into view. Traits, desires, and emotions that have been rejected or suppressed demand recognition. Facing the shadow is often uncomfortable because it challenges the self-image and exposes vulnerabilities. Yet this confrontation is essential for authentic transformation. Only by acknowledging and integrating the shadow can one achieve inner alignment, freeing energy that was previously consumed by denial and resistance. Solitude provides the safety and containment needed for this integration, allowing the psyche to reconcile opposing forces within itself. The necessity of stillness also extends to decision-making. Major life changes cannot be approached solely from reactive or habitual responses. They require discernment, reflection, and alignment with the deeper currents of one's being. Solitude allows for the incubation of insight, consideration of choices without external interference, and the cultivation of an inner authority that can guide action. Decisions made from this place of inner clarity are more likely to reflect the emerging self rather than the old structures that are dissolving. The capacity to wait, to observe, and to respond with awareness is cultivated in solitude, preparing the individual for meaningful engagement with the world. Ultimately, solitude and stillness are not passive retreats from life. They are active preparations for transformation. They create the space in which the psyche can reorganize, integrate, and align with its true nature. Through attentiveness, emotional engagement, reflection, and shadow work, the individual develops the clarity, authenticity, and inner authority required to navigate change. In this way, stillness is a crucible in which the old self is released, and the new self begins to emerge, fully formed in awareness and readiness to meet life in a conscious, authentic way. This rare, in-between moment must be honored, as it is the threshold where true transformation begins. It is a space that few recognize, even fewer embrace, and yet it is the place where the old and the new converge, where the familiar dissolves and the unknown emerges. Most people are tempted to flee from this moment, to fill it with distraction, activity, or reassurance. They fear the uncertainty, the disorientation, and the unfamiliarity that accompany the collapse of old structures and the gestation of new ones. Yet it is precisely in the willingness to stay, to witness, and to endure this in-between space that the foundations for genuine change are laid. To honor this moment, is to recognize its rarity, to understand that it will not appear again in exactly this form, and to participate consciously in its unfolding. The in-between moment carries with it a paradoxical quality. It is both terrifying and full of possibility. On one hand, the familiar supports and structures of life are no longer reliable, leaving a sense of instability. The identities, routines, and certainties that once provided comfort feel hollow or irrelevant. On the other hand, the dissolution of the old creates a fertile ground for emergence. The psyche, freed from the constraints of habitual thought and conditioned responses, begins to explore new possibilities. Creativity, insight, and intuition become more accessible. Ideas and visions that were previously hidden beneath layers of fear and conformity surface, guiding the individual toward paths that resonate with the authentic self. Honoring this moment means acknowledging both the discomfort and the opportunity, allowing each to coexist without premature judgment or action. In this liminal space, time often feels distorted. Moments may stretch or compress, and the sense of chronological progression becomes less relevant. The past, with its familiar narratives, loses authority, while the future remains uncertain and unformed. The present becomes a heightened field of awareness where each thought, feeling, and sensation carries significance. It is here that subtle signals from the unconscious begin to emerge, guiding attention toward aspects of the self that demand recognition. Dreams, intuition, and synchronicities may intensify, offering messages that point toward integration and transformation. To honor the in-between moment is to cultivate attentiveness, to remain receptive to these signals rather than rushing toward resolution or reassurance. Emotional intensity is often heightened in this threshold period. Old griefs, regrets, fears, and attachments may resurface unexpectedly. Emotions that have been suppressed or denied come forward with a clarity that cannot be ignored. This emotional turbulence is not a sign of failure or weakness. It is the necessary movement of the psyche toward wholeness. Each wave of feeling, when observed and integrated, contributes to the dissolution of the old self and the emergence of the new. Attempting to bypass these experiences or to numb them diminishes the depth of transformation. Honoring the moment means embracing the full spectrum of inner experience, recognizing that even the most uncomfortable emotions are vital components of growth. The in-between moment also reveals the dynamics of attachment and dependency, external validation, habitual patterns of seeking approval, and reliance on familiar structures are tested. The usual supports may feel inadequate or unreliable, prompting a shift toward inner authority. This is a crucial aspect of the threshold experience, the realization that the emerging self cannot be constructed solely from the external world. True transformation requires grounding in internal clarity and alignment, a self-sufficiency that does not reject connection but is not dependent upon it. The moment demands honesty, self-reflection, and a willingness to release reliance on external affirmation, cultivating instead an inner compass that guides action and perception. Reflection becomes essential during this time. The mind naturally seeks coherence, yet in this liminal space, conventional explanations often fail. Questions arise without immediate answers. What is essential? What belongs to the old self? And what resonates with the emerging self? How can one navigate the uncertainty without retreating into fear or distraction? These questions are not to be solved quickly or superficially. They are to be lived with, explored, and observed. Reflection in this space is not passive contemplation, but an active engagement with the evolving self, a dialogue between conscious awareness and unconscious insight that prepares the psyche for integration and expression. Isolation, whether chosen or circumstantial, often accompanies this in-between moment. The world may feel distant, the usual supports less relevant, and solitude may become not only necessary but restorative. This is not withdrawal from life in a destructive sense, but a strategic retreat that allows the self to reorganize and integrate. In this solitude, the individual encounters their own mind and heart without mediation, confronting truths that were previously obscured by distraction or external influence. The capacity to sit with oneself in honesty, without judgment or avoidance, is central to honoring the threshold moment. In this engagement, insight arises naturally, and the emerging self begins to solidify in clarity and intention. The in-between moment is also a space of potential alignment with purpose. When old structures dissolve, there is an opportunity to discern what is meaningful beyond previous obligations, conditioning, or superficial desires. Values, priorities, and direction can be re-evaluated in light of deeper truths. Choices made from this place are more likely to reflect authenticity rather than habitual response or external expectation. This alignment does not require certainty about every step of the path. It requires a willingness to follow the inner resonance and to trust the unfolding process, even in the presence of doubt and ambiguity. Honoring this moment requires patience. Transformation cannot be rushed, and attempts to impose order or control prematurely can undermine the emergence of the new self. The psyche moves in cycles, rhythms, and subtleties that demand respect. By allowing the process to unfold naturally, by observing without forcing, and by responding rather than reacting, the individual cultivates the conditions for profound change. The threshold moment is both fragile and potent, and its power is realized only when met with awareness, patience, and reverence. Finally, this in-between space is a liminal arena where consciousness expands. The old identity, with its limitations, attachments, and defenses, must loosen its grip, while the new self, unformed but potent, begins to take shape. Each thought, feeling, and perception carries significance. Each observation is a step toward integration, and each encounter with discomfort is an opportunity for growth. To honor this rare moment is to participate fully in the unfolding of the psyche, to recognize that the convergence of endings and beginnings is sacred, and to embrace the threshold with courage, openness, and reverence.